8.1, 8.5, because I see them as kind of connected. And I'm also speaking on behalf of members of the Tofino Natural Heritage Group. So I see that the Tofino Housing Corporation has in their strategic plan a sentence that reads, initiate discussion with council about future use of DL 114 for additional housing. That's on top of the already approved plan. Preservation of the remaining forests in DL 114 is paramount to the community. The footprint of the current development is quite enough removal of intact forest. The district should retain the rest of the area and covenant it as part of Tonquin Park. Most locals and visitors see Tonquin as their favorite place and want to see it preserved as forest trail land. The same THC document says, identify possible alternative locations to DL 114 for new housing development. I might mention there's already cleared land in DL 114 at the location of the old bike park, which is now in dangerous condition, and housing there would be an improvement to that space. And item 8.5, since the Woodsmere company purchased the land at 825 Campbell Street at a very low price, I should think at making it a condition of their development that they donate sufficient land for affordable housing would not be too big an ask. It's really time for more creativity and alternative ways of dealing with the high cost of housing in our community. People come here for the natural beauties of the Sound and the Pacific Ocean, and it seems like we're despoiling the very environment that supports us both economically and spiritually. Thank you.
Thank you, Elieen. Who do we have up next, Elise?
Through the mayor, I'm just going to take off Elieen and insert Christine Lowther. And Christine would like to speak to item 8.1 as well. Christine, I'm just going to unmute you for 2 minutes.
Okay, have you got me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Okay, thanks. So temperate rainforests like Tonquin's make up barely a quarter of the world's forest, yet they are the best hope to return from the climate crisis that we're in. Why? Because changes to the world's boreal forest and to the tropical forest are now so rapid that scientists believe they will cross a tipping point and switch from carbon sinks to carbon sources, which is why temperate forests are crucial. And also, when it comes to offsetting global warming, old and young forests are not equal. The older, the better for carbon sequestration. And scientists tell us that the best way to mitigate climate change is to keep and protect the forests that store a lot of carbon already. Clearly, we must protect every little piece that we can. Tofino's position is unique. Most of the rest of the islands being clear-cut, Council's opportunity to contribute to climate mitigation happily presents itself in preserving the remaining property of DL 114. It may not look like Carmanah, but it is mainly old growth and it is all temperate rainforest with some vital wetlands. Developers have been profiting from Tofino for decades. It's time for them to help with year-round affordable housing. On a note for birds, to avoid nesting seasons, any clearing should happen only during the months of October, November, and December. Thanks.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, we'll move on the agenda. I have no mayor's report and we have no delegations. We have one item of correspondence, item 7.1. This is correspondence from the City of North Vancouver to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change strategy about implementing a province-wide ban on anticoagulant rodenticides, copied to all BC local government councils. Is there any action that councillors wish to take on this item? Okay, we'll consider that considered. Okay, the next item, 8.1. And this is an invited presentation from Tofino Housing Corporation regarding the Tofino Housing Corporation strategic plan. And I believe Ian Scott will be presenting to us. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much for having me again this evening. I'm going to hope that share screen here works appropriately.
Looks like it's working in.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. So the Tofino Housing Corporation was started back in 2005, and as you know, was restarted in 2017 as the need for affordable and non-market housing options became critical once again in the community. It was a council initiative to first try to find a non-profit or private developer partner to develop DL 114. That effort was unsuccessful, so the Tofino Housing Corporation was restarted. I was hired as a part-time contract executive director, and we've been working over the last 3 years to bring the vision of housing to Tofino. We took the end of 2020 to look at where we are now, where we're going, and to consider really our first strategic plan as a corporation. And so we were not guided by specific vision or mission statements, although there was something in our incorporation bylaws that resembled somewhat of a vision statement. But we really started there. What was our vision for the housing corporation and where we would like things to go, and arrived at a safe, secure, affordable place to live is available to all people who call Tofino home. We've dropped reference to residents and employees and really just focusing on what is the outcome we're looking to achieve in the community. We recognize that's not we won't be the only actor involved, and vision statements for companies and organizations look to what is the ultimate state we're working towards. Our mission, though, is what we're going to do about achieving this vision, and that's to facilitate the development and operation of below market housing in Tofino. Again, these words are chosen carefully, and I wanted to focus first on this term facilitate. And so we recognize that we're not the only actor working towards this vision, and we're not necessarily, depending on what type of housing we are talking about, we're not actively building and operating housing necessarily. We may have a role in making it happen, working with partners, whether those be other levels of government, whether that be the District of Tofino, whether that be private developers or businesses in the community. And our role in each one of our initiatives might be slightly different, but we're always trying to facilitate these outcomes. The other component, we moved away from the term affordable housing or attainable housing, two terms that were associated with the Housing Corporation previously. And again, that's very much on purpose. This housing continuum is in the strategic plan, and we've identified quite clearly that our activity area is in this middle sphere of non-market housing. So that's housing that is not being delivered by the private market because there is no ability to do so and make any profit or even break even. It's a money-losing venture, and so in that way it's subsidized. It needs government support, policies or other help to make it happen. Cut rate financing, free land, fee waivers, tax breaks, you name it. It needs some kind of financial support to bring it to reality. So this is the sphere of what we would think of as below market housing or subsidized housing. That is a loaded term, often used, subsidized housing, but to recognize that there's quite a large spectrum of housing that starts, I think, somewhere after emergency shelters, because I don't think most people would consider those housing, but then from sort of a transitional housing, so somebody who might be moving out of a shelter into a strongly supportive housing environment before they move into independent living. to that middle category, which is our focus, that independent non-market housing, including both rental and ownership types. And then at the far end of the spectrum is market rental and market ownership housing. And often housing is described as a spectrum, but of course it's not a perfect spectrum, whereby prices or potential tenants may fit into one or more categories, and they are not always sequential. So in terms of our sphere, this is has been our first focus, which is on rental housing. So government funding and financing are required to make this happen, including the District of Tofino being an important actor, and that has included both land and money. Staff housing is really a form of subsidized housing, because those people living in staff housing are not paying the full price of delivering that housing. It's being subsidized in some way. And that really is a business-led effort, and that's the largest segment of affordable housing in the community currently at roughly 800 beds. And our role is not as a developer or operator of this, but looking at how might we support businesses to create more solutions. Non-market price restricted ownership housing is housing that would be sold at cost or somewhat subsidized by the THC or the District of Tofino. Senior level of government financing may be available, but they're not currently putting any grants or other kinds of funding into this ownership component of non-market housing. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, these are solutions that need social service agencies or nonprofit actors to be partners. We may or may not have a role as THC in bringing those to the table. And our strategic plan for the next 3 years identifies a process of reaching out and trying to understand better what might be some of the opportunities, and do we have a role in that? But that's not our primary target at the moment. And then on the far right, the market rental housing, that's really where the District of Tofino in particular can have a strong role. You do already in certain things like your rules around vacation rental, your rules around suites, but you can go further than that if you wanted to create market housing solutions that were more conducive to people who live and work in Tofino. Some jurisdictions even go as far as tax breaks or fee waivers for the development of market rental housing, understanding that building rental housing at a price that wage earners or even people who are salaried employees that they can afford is very difficult in the current construction cost climate. And so that often you need government policy to make that successful, even for for-profit private developers. So in terms of our strategic planning process, we asked, well, where are we going? And that started with the vision and mission considerations, asking ourselves, where do we think we'll be in 10 years? Where are we now? And then how do we get there? And we came up with 4 focus areas: housing development, communications and advocacy, funding, and organizational development. In terms of where are we now, we also took a bit of a scan. What are some of the positive and negative factors at play in the work of the Housing Corporation? So while we list as a positive a demonstrated need and demand for housing, I think people in the community would list that as a negative in terms of their lived experience. But as a strategic plan, we're talking about, you know, what are the factors influencing where we will be going and the kind of things we need to be doing. There has been strong support from the District of Tofino and the business community for the efforts of the Housing Corporation. We have developed over the last few years an organization with a board, a development partner in the Catalyst Community Development Society, and my involvement with some expertise. We have a way to go to continue to develop that. There's an excellent funding environment from both the provincial and federal governments, which if I was presenting 5 years ago would not have been the case, as well as this new tool, the MRDT online accommodation platform that can be provided to an organization like ours and that you're doing, which has been a great help in getting us to where we are today. And we successfully rezoned 2 parcels, Sharp Road and part of DL 114 for our housing projects. I think on the negative side, I think there's some lack of understanding, partly due to how we've communicated publicly around what we do and where we're going. There is a continued and growing gap between housing cost and income. So irrespective of what we're doing at THC, it's going to continue to be harder and harder for people living and working in Tofino to afford likely both rental and housing that's being delivered by the private market. And that comes down often simply to the cost of construction. There's lack of additional zoned parcels. We heard some folks concerned earlier this evening about, or this afternoon, I should say, about using more of DL 114, but that's certainly a negative in terms of us achieving additional housing in the community. The pressure of tourism growth continues to be a driver, and there's uncertainty over infrastructure capacity, whether that's water, the road system, or other infrastructure components in terms of where it sits and what that means for growth in the community, whether that's affordable housing, residential growth, or commercial growth, or just general residential growth as well. So where are we coming from and sort of where we are now? We've sold 2 price-restricted, resident-restricted homes. CMHC has committed to our Sharp Road project with Catalyst, and we're expecting that construction to start on February 8th or 9th. The BC Housing Community Housing Fund is committed to the first apartment building, 35 rental units on DL 114, and we expect that construction to start in summer to fall of 2021. And then we've rezoned that second apartment building for 37 new rental units, and then the 3 duplex sites, which would be both a mix of market and price-restricted homes, as well as 6 suites. If you look at the strategic plan, there's 3 levels. There's the goal, the strategic priorities, and the actions. And I just want to quickly touch on the goal level, but I'm happy to take questions on the other elements in the plan. So when it comes to housing development, we have 5 goals. So developing that rental and price-restricted ownership housing, seeking opportunities to facilitate housing along that full spectrum of need, including sort of on the far side, that homelessness and supportive housing side, through the staff accommodation, and then independent rental and price-restricted ownership. We need to secure land for that non-market housing development. We need to collaborate with agencies who provide that supportive housing, but also who help fund and finance these projects. And we have a longer term goal of working towards becoming our own developer and owner of rental housing. So instead of partnering with an organization like the Catalyst Community Development Society, THC would be in the lead from beginning to end of the process. And for this goal area, we set a target of 30 units of price-restricted, resident-restricted ownership housing by 2030, along with 150 rental units. So where are we now? In terms of in our pipeline, rezoned, working towards funding and building, we have 6 of the former and 92 of the latter. So as we move into the next phase of planning for the next 5-6 years to get us to 2030, it'll become a little bit more balanced towards the restricted ownership type. It'll certainly be informed by the upcoming housing needs assessment, but our current estimation is this is where we're trying to get to. Funding. We need to continue to work to secure ongoing sustainable funding with a diversity of revenue sources, while also continuing to work with the district on the MIBT funding portfolio and securing a longer and a second commitment from the district. With that, our agreement with you runs out in 2022. Communications and advocacy. We want to start to become seen as a leader in the tourism communities for providing affordable non-market housing. And we want to start to take more of a role as an organization, not just that focus on project development, but influencing policy, celebrating our successes, and be seen as an important partner and a community asset. And from an organizational point of view, we need to strengthen some of our governance. We've really been focused on projects, but as an organization, we need to take the time to look at ourselves, continue to build our board that's representative of the needs of the organization, have the skills both at the staff and board level to deliver what we're looking to do, and foster that ongoing support from the community and council. As a subsidiary of the district, without council support, we can't move forward, and without community support, we can't move forward. And then ultimately, also, we want to explore how we might be more active in a regional light, working with other West Coast communities and the local First Nations. There is a plan in the page, which you see the goals drop down into strategic priorities. And then if you dig into the strategic plan, you can see the actions that we've targeted over the next 3 years. And with that, I say thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
You're muted, Mayor Anderson.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Ian. So yes, I'll turn it over to councillors if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Steer.
I guess you're surprised. Thank you, Ian. Once again, I appreciate you providing this important information on the strategic plan and the continued education for council on a complex subject, non-market housing. I did have a couple of questions, more technical in nature. Under the funding, under your strategic priority, it was identified one of the actions in the 2022, and maybe you could give me some more information about the bullet item was exploring ACRD service establishment for affordable housing revenue. And I was wondering if you could explain maybe what that entails.
Yeah, most certainly. So the Capital Regional District, I think, is the best example of where they have the Capital Regional Housing Corporation, which is funded by contributions from the partner municipalities. And so they are active in working in all those different communities. That's a direct line item out of each of those municipalities' budget. And so as part of our strategic planning process, we identified that as a sort of a potential opportunity or question. Does it make some sense for the municipalities within the ACRD to be working together on affordable housing issues? One of the challenges that we have as a housing corporation and in Tofino is the small scale of our operations. Even if we look 10, 15 years out, only having 150 rental units, for example, is a pretty small organization. And so there may be some benefit in collaborating and working regionally. And it may also be through consultation and discussion that the decision is that, no, that doesn't make the most sense in terms of how to move forward over the longer term.
Thank you. And if I could continue, just in the goals for the housing development, the line item was approximately 150 units of rental and 30 units. And I was just wondering, as time progresses and as you'll see in our agenda today, there will be some housing initiatives being brought forward from the private sector. When you look at those goals, will they be adjusted as you look at the marketplace and have information that comes forward? And what I'm basically saying is these aren't static. I am sure that you will be incorporating monitoring as we move forward and maybe adjusting those as you see fit. I assume that would be there, but I had to ask.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point. And you'll see one of the other strategic priorities is continuing to keep abreast of the need in the community. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially in a small place like Tofino, where so much of the rental housing market goes really unadvertised. There aren't centralized data collection facilities at the moment like you have in a larger city like Victoria or Vancouver, where you have rental housing managers who operate many different properties and are able to provide that data to CMHC. And that goes from vacancy rates to rental rates, and in terms of size of wait lists and those kind of things. So I think the housing needs assessment that's going to happen this year will be an important data point. The other key data point, though, will be wait lists. So when we go to rent out Sharp Road, DL 114, when we go to sell the duplexes, how many people do we have looking for housing? And how does that change over time when we have vacancies come up in those units? We had for the Sea Otter, the Gateway home sale just recently, for one small one-bedroom place, we had over 10 applicants, and we have nowhere in sight another opportunity to provide that type of housing to the community. And so there's clearly a need. How deep that need is, how that's impacted by private housing development will emerge over time. And so yes, we need to keep abreast of it and adjust our goals as time goes on.
Thank you. One last quick comment, and it was underneath your communications sector, and it's a language issue for me that I bring up often. And in it, it talks about you use the term tourist community, and with language for me, I often like to refer to our community as a community that has tourism. I don't see ourselves as a tourist community. So it's just a small language thing that I see often in the literature, and just like to bring forward to the Tofino Housing Corporation as my feelings towards what I perceive of this community as. Thank you.
Okay. Other council members have any questions for Mr. Scott? Councillor Chalmers?
Sure, I'd just like to thank you for the work that went into this, and I appreciate the direction that it's going, and I thought it was a great report. So thank you very much, Ian.
Councillor McMaster, I guess you worked on this ahead of time.
I have no questions. I'm quite familiar with it.
Okay, I thank you, Ian. I agree with the strategic plan and the directions it's going. So I'm glad to see that it's been refreshed. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8.2, the official community plan. Long in the making, now coming forward to council. And I believe we have a presentation from community sustainability.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The presentation I'm about to give will include the first reading of the OCP, as well as the companion bylaw piece, which will be the second part of the presentation. They're related, so I thought I'd just make one presentation rather than two, although you're going to get two quotes. Okay, I think if you all nod, I can assume you're looking at the same slide I am that says 2021 Official Community Plan.
Yes.
Great. So today I'm here to present the 2021 Official Community Plan bylaw for first reading. Yep, that's not working. I think we're all familiar with the process and how we got here, but I think you're very familiar with this graphic. But currently we're in step 5 of the plan, which is finalization of the plan. The background is about 3.5 years long. I'll just draw your attention to the last bullet point there. So in November of last year, we presented a draft to council and the community that was about 95% done, and then undertook a consultation process over Christmas for the last 2 months to try to round out the draft to the bylaw that you see before you today for first reading. There was 4 main pieces of feedback we received from the draft. There was some comments from the Coastal Agriculture Roundtable, who were supportive of the document, but asked for a couple of minor changes in terminology, so we amended that. WildSafe BC, similarly supportive of the overall intent of the document, but we strengthened some language around habitat protection. In the engineering section of the bylaw, Mr. Work provided us an overview of district infrastructure. Previously, there'd been a placeholder there until such time as that was provided. And finally, we received a couple of letters and comments from resident and landowners about site-specific concerns, which I reviewed against our guiding principles, and in the end acted to take no action on the site-specific concerns, and sort of bringing it back to the sort of high-level OCP policies. This graphic shows us the visitation from early January to late January from our new consultation software. We can see that we had about 200 visits, 7 were engaged and in that sense made comment or asked questions about the process. Other people who click through a number of items so that we give a sort of total aware visitors of 151. We would expect this to use this tool for many consultation processes coming up. And this is just one piece of that, but I thought it was an interesting graphic to share. We can see that spike sort of around January 11th, and that's related to times that we would email out through our email service. There are also, we also have data about where our traffic's coming from, and it seems at this point, the greatest traffic we have is generated through that email blast. So as far as next steps, following today's meeting, if the bylaw receives first reading, it'll be considered in conjunction with our financial plan, our waste management plan, and any waste management plan the Alberta Clockwork Regional District has. We have a public hearing tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, February 23rd at 4:30 p.m., depending on the outcome of this meeting, and then tentatively set second, third, and final reading for March 9th. 2021. So moving over to the supporting bylaws or companion bylaws, there are 5 in front of council today: the zoning amendment bylaw, a development approval procedures bylaw, which is new, delegation of council authority bylaw, development approval information area bylaw, which is also new, and a fees and charges bylaw. The zoning bylaw amendment pertains to the relocation of the development permit guidelines from the OCP to zoning. And to refresh council's memory, we're doing this to streamline our development process, provide more information to council at the rezoning stage, to comment on use and density and form and character at the same time. We also believe it'll simplify the process to revise DPs to in order to address emergent issues. And for an example would be, perhaps we wanted to provide the more weather protection on overhangs in the downtown core. We can amend the guidelines within the zoning bylaw a lot easier than we can with the OCP. And finally, in this section, the 3 new development permit areas, which are in the OCP, but the guidelines are contained in the zoning bylaw, was the new wildlife habitat development permit area, which covers the majority of our community. The Cox Bay development permit, which is specific to Cox Bay, and steep slopes development permit, which will come into effect for subdivision approvals. The development approval bylaws is a new bylaw, and it's going to replace the land use procedures and fees bylaw, which currently contains a significant amount of other regulations, such as the development approval information, as well as fees. We're relocating those to their own standalone bylaws and repealing this bylaw. The new bylaw, development approval procedures bylaw, will be for just pertain to how to apply for any type of land use permit or application. The delegation of council authority bylaw, basically we're relocating the regulations to do with delegation of council authority in terms of development permits to the delegation of council bylaw, as we are repealing the land use and procedures fee bylaw. The development approval information area bylaw similarly is being relocated from the land use and procedures bylaw to its own bylaw, and then it's also going to be strengthened. This is a bylaw that allows staff to require from developers information about transportation and parking, servicing of structure, public facilities, community services, archaeological matters, and the natural environment. And the DIA bylaws sort of explains how you do that, what's required, when, and if such information is necessary. Finally, the fees and charges bylaws. This will be a significant update, and so we're relocating fees from the land use and procedures bylaw to the fees and charges bylaws, and then updating. The intent was to fund 9% of the planner 1 position from fees. Currently, on the last 5-year average, the fees have covered about 53% of that position. And the intent of these changes was to try to capture more in fees to fund that position, as that position is primarily about 90% related to current planning applications. We've also included a 2% annual increase for the next 2 years, and to achieve the goal of 90%, we're seeing substantial increases in the cost of subdivision applications, some types of development permits, and official community plan amendments. The increases are also they also support the fact that we spend a fair amount of time on subdivision and development permits, and with the new development permit bylaws, the new development permit areas come into play, there'll be a significant more amount of permits for us to process. And finally, we have reductions permitted for minor construction projects in the downtown core, some residential applications, and some applications that have affordable housing components. There's a sixth bylaw amendment that may come to council in the coming months, and that's the MTI and bylaw notice amendments. And this is related to the ability of the district to potentially have regulations to deal with non-compliance in terms of development permit areas. We wanted to make sure that we had this one right, so this one is currently sitting with our lawyers, and again, council can potentially expect to see this before the OCP is finalized. And that's it for the report. I think we're all familiar with the OCP. I know we've spoke a lot about it in the last 3.5 years, and a lot in the last 3 months. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have, and look forward to any comments and the conversation. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, I'll open the discussion up to council members for questions and comments. And I guess we're moving, since we were presented on both items 8.1 and 8.3, we'll take questions on both of those items. Any council members have questions? It's very straightforward. Councillor Steer would like to begin.
Sure. Yeah, it is mostly a comment, and I do have one comment on the companion bylaws. It's a small one, but first of all, Aaron, I just want to thank you and your staff for the tremendous amount of work, consultation, analysis, and thought over the last 3 years to produce this document. And over the last 2 years, this council has, we've had the ability to comment, and so please bear with me for one last little sort of generalized comment. And I had all kinds of notes. I consolidated them down in the name of brevity, but I did want to comment on how in the OCP as a guide for decisions on planning and land use management as the purpose of that. And the OCP will be an important tool in the discussions around limits to growth or growth management. However, as you know, it cannot be used alone in those discussions and decisions, and we must look at many aspects of service to the community, some of which are within the district's responsibilities, such as childcare, protective services, recreation, and environment. And there are other areas of service that we do have some areas of influence, such as the delivery of healthcare services, school capacity, community policing, to name a few. And the OCP as a guide to decisions on planning and land use management cannot be used in isolation and must be part of a comprehensive and integrated approach to growth for a livable community here in Tofino. And I think the guiding principles of this OCP are a solid foundation to work from. So I really commend you once again on that. And it's not too, and I also don't want, I had a whole bunch of notes about water, and I'm extremely aware of the constraints that water and the risks and all that impose, but I wanted to have that larger comment in general about the value of the OCP and that the guiding principles that were used as a solid foundational framework. So I just wanted to thank you once again. The one small question on the companion bylaw regarding in the fees and charges, and I noted that in subdivision fees, for example, that and I understand the intent to fund positions, and I wholly agree with that the development should pay for itself and not be a burden on existing ratepayers. And I just want to make sure that the district is doing its part. So my question really stems around, are the requirements, for example, of subdivision, are they a result of district requirements? And have these requirements increased in complexity over the years? You know, is this something that the district has also some form of responsibility, or is this something that is just out in the requirements that are needed? I was just curious about that in general.
I'll see if I can address that question. So in my time here, subdivisions have gotten a lot more complicated as the district has gotten more sophisticated. And so trying to understand what's going on with our water system, or the idea that we might have to think about our drainage once in a while, or how much sewage we're going to put in, has become more important and has come to the forefront. And so we spend a significant amount of time addressing that through primarily through finance, planning, and engineering, as well as an improving officer. So it's gotten a lot more complicated. Some of it has to do with provincial regulations as well. And so as this province as the province gives the municipalities responsibilities that they didn't have before, we have to address those. As the Ministry of Transportation needs to be involved, or the archaeological branch, or Forest Lands and Natural Resources, and we have to take all into their information into account. And to do this, it just takes a number of people a lot of time. And if there's any of the fees that we've increased that really truly need to be increased, at subdivision and development bylaws, they're very, very complicated, and I'm not sure that 10 years ago we were giving them the justice they deserve. We are creating new lots, and these lots impact the entire community. You know, how much water they're using, whether we have the road capacity to deal with it, whether we have the hydropower to power them. They don't seem to be getting less complicated.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other councillors wish to comment or have questions? Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Having worked with you on the previous OCP, I probably know more than the rest of the council as to how much work goes into this. And I think you've done a stellar job this time. And I'd just like to thank you for doing that and not involving me in it this time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McMaster. Councillor Chalmers.
Sorry. Well, I don't have anything new to add. I think considering the amount of work, as everybody has said, that's gone into it, I think it's worth acknowledging and also putting my thanks forward. And it's been very interesting, and I've learned a lot in all of the reading of the various iterations of it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to promise that the next one won't take 3.5 years. Bob's nodding.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments of gratitude. And I'd really like to acknowledge the change in direction as well that the OCP has taken in terms of being more of a land use focused document, and our other more visionary statements contained in other planning documents, and overall the planning structure now that the district have is vastly improved, I think, over the course of these various planning documents that we've developed, and over what we had in the not too distant past. So thank you. And so now we go through some labor pains over the next few months, I guess, as the gestation period is over. Okay.
Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
May I just say thank you to the four of you and to all the previous council members in the support that we've been given at planning to get this done. And I also want to thank the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation for being involved, and finally the community of Tofino and all our stakeholders. It's been a lot of people putting a lot of time and effort into us to make sure that everybody's thanked, because this is a community plan. So.
Okay. Thanks again, Aaron, and to all your staff and people that worked on it. Okay, I guess we'll look towards the recommendation that the District of Tofino Official Community Plan, Bylaw number 1290, 2021, be introduced and read a first time. Who would like to move that?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, so that is moved, seconded by two councillors. We'll take that as a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote on first reading. All in favor? Motion is carried. Now we have a number of recommendations in the OCP companion bylaws. And maybe just for the sake of time, I will move them from the chair, since there are a number of them. So I'll move the first one, that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1299, 2021 be introduced and read a first and second time, and that the public hearing for the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1299, 2021 be waived, and that staff be directed to publish notices advertising to the public of the waiver of the public hearing for the Tofino District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1299, 2021. Is there a second? Second, Councillor McMaster. Any discussion on this? I see no hands up, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. The next recommendation is that the District of Tofino Delegation of Council Authority Amendment Bylaw number 1237 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Is there a second? Seconded. Any discussion on this motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Next recommendation, I will move from the chair that the District of Tofino Development Approval Information Area Bylaw number 1300, 1221 or 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Is there a second? Seconded. Discussion on this? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. And the next recommendation, I will move from the chair that the District of Tofino Fees and Charges Bylaw number 1271.04, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Is there a second? Seconded. Discussion? Comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. And the final recommendation in the OCP companion bylaws, and I'll move this from the chair, that the District of Tofino Development Approval Procedures Bylaw number 1301, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Is there a second? Seconded. Any discussion or comments on this? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay. We can move on then to item 8.4. Thank you, Aaron. And this is a zoning amendment application for the shore, 1368 to 1380 Main Street. And we have a report from Community Sustainability from Mr. Thick, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Mayor Anderson, and good afternoon, Council. I will just share my screen here to go through a brief presentation. So ideally, everybody is now looking at the screen that says Zoning Amendment Moss Development 380 Main Street. I'm just going to click one or two things here. Get myself organized. So this presentation pertains to the zoning amendment application for 380 Main Street. That's the foreshore lease in front of the shore building. Today we'll be considering second reading of the proposed zoning amendment bylaw. Background on this particular application: it was received on May 12th of 2018. Permission to proceed was granted April 28th, 2020. First reading was granted September 8th, 2020. So not too long ago, but I'll go through a little bit of the application just so everybody's on the same page as we begin to consider this zoning amendment bylaw. So the location is 380 Main Street. As I've noted, it's the foreshore lease that's in front of the shore building. We are considering an amendment that would allow essentially a subdivision of the foreshore lease and the sale of a portion of this foreshore lease to a private landowner. The proposal is a zoning amendment that would reduce the minimum required lot size for the shore CD zone. Currently, the proposed subdivision would create a lot that is smaller than the minimum required lot size, and so this zoning amendment would permit the proposed subdivision and the acquisition of the land. This image here shows the approximate location of the proposed new lot. So that area that's within the blue shape is actually within the foreshore lease. However, that section of the foreshore lease has been filled and is essentially the provincial government has offered to sell it to the applicant. So a foreshore lease must be associated with an adjacent upland parcel. Currently, the foreshore lease that is in front of the shore building is associated with a unit within the shore building that the applicant owns. The applicant is looking to separate these two assets, and so in order to retain control of the foreshore lease, he must find another way to associate it with an upland parcel. Currently, the shore building, the area around it is owned by the Shore Strata Corporation. So a new parcel needs to be created, which is what's driving this application. And after consultation with the province, they've confirmed that they have offered the applicant the opportunity to buy the foreshore or the filled foreshore section of the lease. However, it still needs to be subdivided off. So taking a quick look at some of the policies we use to examine these types of applications. This is a bit of a curious application as it's a bit more of a technical exercise than something that is driving a specific development application or a specific physical change to the area of Tofino. But there's general kind of comments about the importance of a working waterfront and the vision to action, as well as comments about amenities and infrastructure, particularly regarding pedestrian-friendly downtown areas and walking and biking throughout the community, and then some general comments regarding the health of ecosystems and watersheds. The area under consideration is actually not designated within the Tofino OCP as it's part of the foreshore lease currently. Should the proposal be successful and the if filled area become a new parcel, staff anticipate it will kind of be absorbed into the village designation. Within this application, one of the primary aspects of the OCP that we are considering is this desire for public access to the waterfront and to continue the existing access that is currently in place. So the zoning of the property, the zoning of the lease and the upland property is the Shore Comprehensive Development District. This zoning was developed in anticipation, of the shore development itself. The minimum lot size that's currently specified by the zone prevents the proposed subdivision, so we would be considering lowering that minimum lot size. The province has advised the applicant that they're unwilling to subdivide a section of the foreshore lease off and sell it without that subdivision being permitted by zoning. So a text amendment to the existing zone would be the most straightforward approach to allowing the necessary minimum lot size. An alternate approach would be to create an alternative zone that is specific for that proposed new lot. However, staff are of the opinion that the text amendment approach is the most expedient and straightforward, and we don't have any concerns regarding this approach. Initially, there was, kind of the initial knee-jerk reaction that if you lower the minimum lot size, that may allow an undesirable subdivision. However, this would be very difficult to facilitate, given that the shore property itself is owned by the Strata Corporation. So there would have to be a significant portion of the Strata Corporation would have to want to basically probably decommission or destroy a portion of the building in order to facilitate another subdivision, which would be a very unlikely thing to happen. Some of the considerations with regards to this application would be the requirement for public access. So currently, there's a small section of the property that does not actually officially allow public access across it to access the waterfront. So we would be requiring a statutory right-of-way to ensure that public access is continued down to the foreshore lease in the waterfront area. We would also be looking to limit uses on the new parcel. The new parcel itself is quite small, and so it would be difficult to imagine any sort of significant development happening on there. However, to avoid unwanted construction, things like fences or walls or anything like that, that might impede pedestrian traffic or affect the view or enjoyment of the upland property owners, we've discussed with the applicant the need for a no-build covenant on this new parcel. Wildlife and environmental considerations were brought up at first reading. As this rezoning application will not result in any material change to the area, staff don't have any concerns at this point. Flooding and tsunami concerns are negligible, as no habitable structures are planned for the area. And as far as a community amenity contribution, the applicant has offered a statutory right-of-way, as well as has agreed to the no-build covenant. As this particular rezoning application won't result in much material change to the area and won't result in any sort of significant land lift, staff are recommending that no additional community amenity contribution be considered at this point. We proceeded with a referral after successful first reading. No major concerns were raised by outside agencies. One thing that is worth noting is that BC Hydro may require statutory right-of-way across the newly proposed lot to service 380 Main Street. So this is something that the applicant will have to discuss with BC Hydro. The application was referred to the Shore Strata Corporation. There were multiple concerns that came back about the potential for additional development or impeding views from existing apartments. However, with the no-build covenant, staff don't anticipate this to be an issue. The one other thing that staff are recommending in association with this application is a waiver of the public hearing. Typically, public hearings are held after second reading. Staff are recommending waiving the public hearing requirement, as there'll be no material change in the property. The zoning amendment isn't intended to further a specific development, but to assist the applicant in separating assets. And the provincial government has written a letter of general support and willingness to sell the parcel to the applicant. So the options would be to grant second reading to the amendment bylaw, grant second reading with amendments if they are deemed necessary, reject or refuse the application, or defer, otherwise deal with the application. Staff are recommending the first option. Moving forward, we would be considering the public hearing, or else moving through the public hearing waiver process, which also involves advertising in the newspaper and advising nearby properties. Then we would bring the application back for third reading, look to finalize any required legal agreements, and then bring the application back to be adopted. If there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to speak to them.
Yeah, open it to council first for questions or comments. Okay, I had a quick question. Is there any parking implications of this application?
Not that I'm aware of. So typically parking is considered primarily with building permits. So the shore zone has particular permissions for building things. And then when something is built, usually there are parking requirements that are come into play in association with however many residential units or however large the floor area of the commercial unit is. So at this point, because there isn't going to be any material change to the property, parking considerations are not really a major factor in this application, in my understanding. However, if at any time in the future anything was constructed that had a parking component to it, that would be a requirement at that point as per the zoning bylaw regulations.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I would look to council members to maybe move the recommendations.
I'll move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1296/2020 be read a second time, and that staff be authorized to waive the public hearing for the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1296/2020 and publish notices advising the public of the waiver.
Is there a second? Seconded. Any further discussion or comments? Call the question then. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Thick. We'll move on to item 8.5, and this is a zoning amendment application, Woodsmere at 825 Campbell Street. And we have a report from Community Sustainability. Mr. Thick.
This one's mine again. I'll be sharing my screen a second time. All right, so hopefully everybody is looking at the screen that says zoning amendment Woodsmere Holdings 825 Campbell. This is a consideration of first reading for a zoning amendment bylaw for the property at 825 Campbell. The application was received on November 7th of 2019. Originally, there was a permission to proceed brought forward, I believe in January of 2020. However, since that time, the applicant made some changes to their application and permission to proceed was again considered on October 13th. And we are back here again to consider first reading of this particular application. The location of the property, 825 Campbell, is it's a fairly large property, approximately 27 acres. Just north of the Gas and Go and Mobile Home Park, and kind of located behind several residential properties and the co-op gas station along the highway. So this zoning amendment is a fairly significant amendment that would facilitate the creation of a residential neighborhood on the subject property. Single-family dwelling lots with suites and purpose-built rental apartments are being contemplated in this particular proposal. This is a scaled down version of what was originally presented to council in early 2020. So this is currently what the proposal looks like. Area 1A towards the top of the screen is the proposed location for a 55-unit apartment building, or up to 55 units, I should say. And Area 1B is the location of 24 single-family dwelling lots. These single-family dwellings would also be permitted to have legal suites. Staff are anticipating the rest of the property to eventually be developed over time. As you can see, just to the left part of the image, it does mark that area of the property for future development. However, at present, this is the extent that the applicants are asking for within this zoning amendment application. However, staff will also be requesting some additional information that kind of helps us lay out the rest of the proposed development and ensure that we have adequate connection and to neighboring properties and the rest of the town, as well as parklands and various other considerations in a development of this magnitude. So the proposal, as I've noted, is currently for 24 single-family lots, 55 units of apartments units, and the single-family lots would have suites. And as noted, the rest of the lot is anticipated to develop in a similar manner. There may be some slightly different forms of housing, but primarily this will be a residential development. So the vision to action mentions a variety of policies that apply as would be expected from a development proposal of this magnitude. There's a lot of support for a variety of healthy and affordable housing forms and types, considerations for expanding the pedestrian network, and quality public spaces in all developments are mentioned, as well as parks, natural green spaces, and greenways being abundant throughout the community, interconnectivity, and that these public areas are well used. So these kinds of principles are hopefully going to help design the eventual build out of this site. Within the official community plan, the property is designated as Clockwork View Estates. This is primarily an area that's intended for residential development with some accessory commercial uses. The proposed density is an issue under the existing official community plan. However, staff don't anticipate that this zoning amendment bylaw will be close to adoption before the official community plan is adopted. And the new official community plan will not have the same density restrictions. So staff are currently recommending that we continue to move forward with this application. However, we may have to hold it until the new OCP is adopted if that becomes an issue. So other aspects of the development are in line with OCP goals. There's robust support for housing, particularly more affordable housing and housing that kind of serves the needs of many of the working members of the community, as well as you know, a wide variety of considerations that staff are trying to take into account, including kind of the goals of smart growth and environmental design, complete neighborhoods, connectivity throughout the community, and various other aspects of the OCP that will play into the eventual design of the neighborhood. The Affordable Housing Needs Assessment outlines a few housing gaps that may be applicable to this particular development, including lower to moderate price year-round rental accommodation, home ownership units at the low end of the market, and affordable rental accommodation for seasonal employees. So with the combination of purpose-built rental apartments, as well as fee simple ownership single family dwelling units, hopefully this development will kind of tie into a variety of the affordable housing needs assessment goals and identified gaps. The zoning, we're currently zoned rural district, which is intended for larger lot residential development. A new comprehensive development zone that's been drafted for council's considerations would allow the property to be built out as the plan has indicated. There will be a significant increase in density, but there will be a reduction in some other uses, including short-term rentals, the ability to have a caretaker's cottage, and various agricultural permissions. So the land use considerations for a development of this size are fairly significant, and staff are working through it kind of stage by stage. At this point, we generally have a lot of support for the actual land use itself. However, there will be many considerations from a public works and engineering perspective to ensure that we can actually, in practical reality, facilitate this development. So use and density are kind of the primary concern with any zoning application, including things like lot sizes and the required setbacks for those lots. So for council's I guess kind of information, or as a way to illustrate what the proposed single family aspect of the development may look like, the lots will be similar in size. They may be slightly smaller than some of the lots that are existing in the Ocean Park area. The overall height will be a little bit higher, and the setbacks will be a little bit larger. So we'll still be able to facilitate, I worked out the numbers, and we were looking at potentially, even on the smallest lots that are being proposed for this particular development, about a 2,000 square foot home would be quite feasible. So these aren't intended to be large lots for large estate homes. However, they will hopefully provide opportunities for many people here in the district to enter the housing market if they wish. One of the considerations that staff have that we'll be continuing to discuss with the applicant is actually that of parking. It seems like almost a kind of a small thing to mention at this point in the application. However, we want to make sure that you know, the proposed road and the proposed lots are not kind of overwhelmed by cars everywhere, as as has happened in other developments within the district for small lots. So that's one thing that we'll be taking a close look at as we continue to move forward. As far as servicing, this is probably one of the largest questions with regards to this application. Prior to second reading, we will be requiring a full servicing brief with information at the discretion of the Director of Public Works to be provided to district staff for review. These will be things like water and sewer usage, drainage concerns, various stormwater management proposals, and all the various things that go into consideration for a development of this size and a subdivision like this. Traffic will also be a major consideration here. Access and connectivity will be taking into account many of the MMTP goals and considerations, as well as just trying to ensure that putting this much additional density on the lot will not significantly impact the traffic running along Campbell Street there, and will not cause any major backup. So there's definitely some information that's needed around that area as well. Emergency considerations, the property is actually out of the flooding and tsunami zone. One thing that's kind of been discussed by staff and has been mentioned to the applicant is the potential to use a portion of the property as a emergency evacuation area. And it could, double as another use when not being used for that purpose. However, this is something we'll continue to discuss with the applicant should the application move forward. Form and character, I mentioned a little bit about this with regards to lot sizes, required setbacks, overall height for the single family developments. However, we typically don't have our development permit areas don't apply to single family and duplex structures. We typically like to give individual owners a reasonable amount of flexibility with how they want to design their own house. However, when it comes to the apartment building, there is no development permit area for this particular property. So prior to second reading, staff are going to request some renderings of the apartment building, including shade studies, how it's going to look from the highway, all those sorts of things for council's consideration, so that we actually have a good understanding of what this apartment building is going to look like, as we won't have much control over that without a development permit area in place on this property. Parking, I mentioned this earlier, but we want to ensure that the lot size is large enough to avoid any future issues with parking in the neighborhood. And the amenity would be further discussed. I believe I outlined kind of a fairly strict interpretation of the community amenity guidelines within the staff report. However, there may be opportunity to have alternate discussions as well. Staff intend to have these discussions with the applicant prior to second reading and bring forward something for council's consideration at second reading should the application move forward. So at this point, the options today would be to grant first reading to the proposed bylaw, grant first reading with amendments, reject or refuse the application, defer or otherwise deal with the application. Staff are recommending the first option. However, it's worth noting that there may be some fine tuning and adjustments that have to happen to this proposed bylaw, as well as other legal agreements that will likely be brought forward at second reading, or kind of all these things will be determined prior to second reading and brought forward at second reading for council's consideration. The next steps would be to move through our traditional referral process and then review some more detailed plans, have some additional discussions with the applicant, look at a traffic impact assessment, servicing brief, and the various other pieces of information that will be pretty important to help staff understand the actual feasibility of this development. We then bring the application back for second reading and move into the public hearing step of the process. And if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to speak to them at this point. Thanks.
Okay. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Chalmers.
Sure, I'm comfortable at this point moving forward with the application. I think all of my concerns and issues are addressed in what staff's brought up with the land use considerations. So knowing that those are being looked into and further discussed makes me comfortable at this step going forward. And I'm happy to see that the short-term rentals would be taken out of it to go instead of going from 5 to 24. So that's key for me. And yeah, that kind of covers everything for me.
Sorry, Councillor Chalmers, did you say you were comfortable or uncomfortable? Because I heard uncomfortable.
Sorry, comfortable.
Okay, the audio isn't great, so I wanted to clarify that. Other council members have questions or comments? Councillor Steer?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, Acting Mayor Anderson. Yeah, I support, as Councillor Chalmers was bringing forward, I believe that it was a thorough report, and many of the aspects and concerns that that I had moving forward, staff has a very keen eye on, especially around the servicing components that had been identified in the report around power, sanitary, drainage, road, water, supply and pressure. I will admit to, this is the creation of a very large new neighborhood in our small community. So the size and impact of such a development is something that does concern me on many levels. I think we all recognize the realities of our housing supply in Tofino. But we have talked about absorption rates of, approximately 20 units a year, and we're now talking about DL 114 and the amount that will be going on there. Sharp Road, we now have this proposal in front of us. There's significant amounts moving forward. I do have some concerns, I will admit, around the overall intent for the property, not having a full understanding of what the applicant may be looking at moving forward on this 27-acre property does pose some concerns as well. It would be nice to have at least an indication of what the intent might be for further development of this property, as I can see that these same questions around the servicing will come up. And so having that broader understanding of what will be happening there, I would be happy to know if that could come forward. I do support the other part was I am looking forward to the schematics of it, because it's hard for me to have a visual, especially around the apartment complex. So I think it will help maybe alleviate some of the concerns I have around the impacts around there. You did discuss around the green spaces and how that is important to neighborhoods. And so I would like to know more about what is entailed for this large piece, which goes further to the further development of the property moving forward. So in general, I certainly support moving this past first reading, and the fact that you will be bringing forward a full and comprehensive servicing brief moving forward. So thanks, Peter, appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Steer. Mr. Thick.
Oh, I just wanted to mention there's something that I wrote about actually in the staff report, but I didn't bring up in my presentation that is probably worth mentioning, that Councillor Steer made me remember with his comments. And that's that we, within the new OCP, we actually do have fairly strict limits to growth that are actually identified. And it is worth noting that this application will likely, as it'll be adopted after the new OCP is adopted, occupy a significant portion of the proposed growth over the next 5 years for the District of Tofino. That being said, it does represent, from the private sector at least, it does represent probably the most in line with district policy and the affordable housing needs policy of an application that we have currently under consideration. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Thick, through the chair. Yeah, it was in one of my notes is that, this is by far the most viable residential development that I've seen in my time, and probably in my time in Tofino. So I am supportive of that, and understanding that it meets a lot of the V2A visions that we have moving forward. It's just the sheer size and of the movement that has been going on, particularly in this very short space of time. But yes, thank you for bringing that up, and I was aware of that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McMaster, did you have any comments?
I'm happy to support this. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad to see that it's almost like a phased development, and it's not going to be developed all at once. So that gives us time to rethink a little bit. And I say it's been a long time coming. It's been a long road, and I'm glad to see that a private developer is stepping forward with what I hope is going to be affordable accommodation. So having said that, I will move the recommendation that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1304 2021 be introduced and read a first time.
Okay, is there a second? Second, Councillor Chalmers. Any further comments? I have one. I didn't go fully around the table and get back to me. So yeah, I'm glad to support this at first reading. And I think we've covered off all of the questions that I had around the development. I look for a positive response to some of those questions around amenities, parking, green space, etc. In order for support to come at second reading. And I'm not sure if it was covered off in the staff report or not, but certainly limiting short-term rentals would be something I'd be interested in hearing about as we move forward. But I'm happy to support it at first reading. Any further comments? I'll call the question and all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Thick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream Grant. And we have a report from Protective Services. Mr. Baker, were you going to speak to this?
Yes, I would love to take the opportunity to speak to this. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for your time. I'm just going to take a moment here to share my screen and get a presentation ready for you. Okay, hopefully we're all seeing Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go through a bit of a presentation here, and then we've got some opportunity at the end for any questions. So COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream Grant application. So the province of British Columbia and Canada have partnered to develop the COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Grant, or infrastructure stream, as a part of the Investing in Canada infrastructure program in response to the effects of COVID-19 on communities across the province. So when it comes to projects that meet the criteria, we're focusing on two different ones here. So provide retrofits and repairs and upgrades to local government and Indigenous government buildings, health infrastructure, and educational infrastructure, as well as allow communities to improve their infrastructure to increase the resiliency and efficiency in preventing the spread of COVID-19, including protective screens and the ability to physically distance. So when we look at our infrastructure, the District of Tofino's asset management plan does identify the need to replace the existing fire hall. The current facility is a repurposed building from the 1950s that was relocated from Radar Hill to downtown Tofino around 1959. The building currently houses the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department, Tofino Emergency Operations Center, Emergency Social Services, and the Protective Service Department. The age and previous use of the existing building means that it does not meet the modern seismic requirements, while also being located on the edge of a 20-meter tsunami inundation zone. Each year, this building requires electrical upgrades and renovations to keep up with the needs of a modern fire department. Storage is extremely limited, and every available space is being used. Maintaining safe distancing is not possible in most areas of the hall, which affects operations and responses during the pandemic. Firefighter turnout gear is constantly exposed to harmful exhaust, and the training room only accommodates a maximum of 16 people, while the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department has averaged between 25 and 30 members for the last 4 years. The leading cause of death in a volunteer firefighter is cardiac arrest. Our members take this very seriously and have invested heavily in ourselves and our community. Over the past 5 years, firefighters have personally invested over $30,000 into the fire hall, including fitness equipment, a small kitchen, and a benefit plan for all of our members. I include this slide here because I want to be clear that as members of the fire department, we're not always just asking for money. We are contributing on an annual basis, and we have more plans that are included in this year's financial plan to provide more equipment to the department as well. West Coast Inland Search and Rescue. They average between 30 and 40 members between Tofino and Tle-o-qui-aht, and this is their current facility. The building has no running water, a composting toilet, and space heaters for warmth and drying equipment. The training area, command center, and parking for the 2 vehicles is all the same space. Maintaining training requirements and standards while managing safe distancing during the pandemic continues to be a major challenge, especially during the winter season. With Public Works, the lack of covered storage in the yard impacts the longevity of several pieces of equipment that is sensitive to the rain and moisture. Lack of proper exhaust extrication system means that for health reasons, vehicles must be parked outdoors. Lack of meeting, training, and break space is being provided by temporary picnic tables in the vehicle bays. Ad hoc and self-storage, gear lockers, kitchen and laundry facilities reduce the overall functionality, quality, and represents a low investment standard in the work conditions for our staff. There are currently 3 offices for 5 approved positions: the director, manager, foreman, admin, and the engineer and asset coordinator. So 4 persons are sharing 2 small offices. There is currently no office space for the wastewater treatment plant project team, and the shared office space has proven to be very challenging for safe distancing during the pandemic as well. The COVID-19 infrastructure stream is designed to target projects starting before September 30th, 2021 and completing by December 31st, 2021. Remote communities such as ourselves are able to extend projects for a further year with a project end date of December 31st, 2022. The Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building, as we're calling it, is a project approximately 10,000 square foot upgrade to the existing search and rescue building and public works building. The project would result in the development of a seismically safe, modern public safety building located outside of the Cascadia Fault tsunami inundation zone. This new building would be the home of YSAR, Tofino Volunteer Fire Department, Emergency Operations Center, Emergency Social Services, and Public Works. If the application was successful, preparation would begin quickly to relocate the public work building within the same lot, establish temporary offices, and commence the site prep for the project. Our concept that would meet the criteria is to expand the YSAR space to include plumbing, bathroom, and storage, include a 6 apparatus bays for use by the Volunteer Fire Department, Public Works, and YSAR, expanded training room, emergency operations center, an office space for 2 fire department members, 1 emergency preparedness coordinator, and 8 public works staff. Improved storage, equipment, and laundry rooms with break areas for Tofino Volunteer Fire Department and Public Works. So just looking at the image here, if you look to the right, the gray area is the existing search and rescue building. Everything to the left would be expansion and new additions. So the Public Works current building is within that footprint of what you see there. The amber piece connecting the YSR building to the rest of the expansion, that would be a possible areas for restrooms and additional storage space for YSR. And then you can see that there's 6 bays in there and all the other spaces. And so the full schematics are in the package that you received with the report. So staff has engaged Herald Engineering for some Class C estimates and some general designs just to get some ideas of how this might work. The 2021 Class C designs took into account municipal road alignment, proximity of the future wastewater treatment plant, site planning, including parking, and public works building yard reorganization and relocation. The Class C cost estimates for the development of the TVERB upgrade is $5,143,750. This includes the planning, design, mechanical, bid and tender services, project management, site preparation and construction, and permits, fees, and charges. So when we break down those costs, the eligible costs, planning for 30,000, design and engineering for 415, construction and materials come in at about 3.5 million. Other eligible costs, just over 100,000, and a contingency of 1 million, just over 1 million, for total eligible costs of 5,143,750. Looking at our ineligible costs, there are a few. Temporary public works offices and workshop, because we do have to relocate the existing building. That comes in at about 90,000. Our legal advice, tendering and contract development at 10,000. The FF&E, so furniture, and that is 50,000. And the public works building relocation at about 75,000 for total ineligible costs of approximately 225,000. Our total gross project cost for eligible and ineligible is 5,368,750. So in conclusion, this report and presentation seeks council's support that staff be authorized to submit an application for grant funding in the amount of 5,143,750 of the Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building upgrade to the Investment in Canada Infrastructure Program. And that the District of Tofino fully supports the Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building upgrade project and commits to any associated ineligible costs and cost overruns. I'm sure there's some questions there, so I'm happy to take any questions at this point. And I believe I also have Aaron Rogers and Fraser Work still with us. So if there are any questions that sort of slide over into their areas, then I believe they're with us to assist also. And I will just stop sharing my screen here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Are there questions from council? Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Chief Baker. I have to commend staff on this one. Their ability to quickly pivot on such a proposal in the time frames that have been set before you. So incredible work on that. I fully support, of course, this opportunity. It does point to, once again, how a grant comes up. We've got to pivot quickly and chase on to something, and recognizing that. The only question I have really is around the nostalgic value of our old fire hall and what repurposing there may be. And I know that's not a discussion for right now, but I'm sure everybody on council as well as staff probably has ideas of what that might be. And I just wonder if within the grant framework, if there's any money allocation that could be directed towards the repurposing. I know it's a far stretch, but it's a question I thought I could ask.
Yeah, I think the possibilities are pretty limitless of what we could do with the space at the current fire hall. I'm picturing a squash court in the latter bay, but it could be used for, there's all sorts of office space requirements within the municipality, recreation space, but that would come down to future planning. As far as how funds could be shifted towards this building, it's something that we weren't able to really consider with the time that we did have. We had to sort of put all hands on deck to focus on the one opportunity and figure out how we could make use of this current space at a later date if we were successful. So,
any other Councillor Chalmers?
Yeah, I'm fully in support of this. I myself have asked what happens, how do we run an EOC if there's an earthquake and there is no EOC to go to? So having something safer above the Cascadia, and just the need has been there for as long as I've been in Tofino. So it's great that this has come up and that you guys, I agree, have pivoted so quickly. Thank you.
Councillor McMaster, did you have anything? You're unmuted already.
I have nothing to add. I'm glad to see that we're going after this grant. I hope we get it, and it's a good idea.
Okay, I will echo all those sentiments, and there will be many if we are successful. I'm sure there'll be many competing ideas about the old fire hall, but that's in the future. So let's look to the recommendation now provided by staff. Would someone like to move that?
Sure. I'll move that staff be authorized to submit an application for grant funding in the amount of $5,143,750 for the Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building upgrade to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, British Columbia, COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream, and that the District of Tofino fully supports the Tofino Volunteer Emergency Response Building upgrade project and commits to any associated ineligible cost and cost overruns.
Okay, seconded, Councillor McMaster. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks
Thank you
again
very much.
for that, for moving on that so quickly.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on the agenda to item 8.7, and these are the minutes of the Board of Variance for receipt. Someone like to move receipt of those?
Move receipt.
Moved. Is there a second? Seconded. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Motion is carried. And we have the minutes of the Tofino Rec Commission meeting of December 12th.
Move
Also
receipt.
for receipt. Moved receipt. Second, Councillor McMaster. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, section 9, we have 2 bylaws coming forward for adoption. And I'll move these just for in consideration of time. Item 9.1 is the District of Tofino Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1288, 2020 for third reading and adoption. And I'll move from the chair that the District of Tofino Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1288, 2020 be read a third time and be adopted. Is there a second? Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? That motion is carried. And secondly, 9.2, District of Tofino Delegation of Council Authority Amendment Bylaw number 123704, 2020. And I'll move this from the chair that the District of Tofino Delegation of Council Authority Amendment Bylaw number 123704, 2020 be adopted. Is there a second? Seconded. Discussion, comments, all in favor? Motion is carried. Moving now to section 10 on the agenda, business initiated by council members. And we have, I think, 2 reports from Councillor Chalmers, one that's not officially listed. Is that correct, Councillor Chalmers?
That is, I sat on COVID Island Health meeting on Thursday, so I have an update from that.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
Okay, so I'll start with an update on the strategic planning for tours in Tofino, and I'm incorporating into that we actually had a board meeting today, so I'll put the 2 together. The strategic planning phase is currently in process right now. They've completed 4 workshops for membership and are about to start 3 residential workshops, which are scheduled over the next 2 weeks. There was a great turnout for the membership workshops. I think they had about 52 participants and some very strongly emerging themes. This is all to do with the MRDT for the next sort of 5-year phase. There has not been a huge turnout so far yet for the community. So hopefully there'll be an uptake in that over the next few days. There's 3 workshops planned, but they may decrease that to 2 depending on how the uptake is. And once this is done, the process, the results will go back to the staff, and then there will be a presentation to council on the results of that. So we'll be expecting that. And then moving into the board meeting, there was an update to the board regarding the council board meetings, and a lot of emergent themes that came out of that similar. I think there was a lot of desire for communication, and out of that has come the idea of a group which Nancy's called Together Tofino Committee, and it's something that I've seen that we've talked about in our own conversations here, and I think it's a really great idea for the community. And the idea of it is, just one second, an open communication and trust in order to examine community-wide issues related to the tourism economy and develop and implement cooperative strategies to secure Tofino's competitive position as a leading BC coastal destination while maintaining a highly desirable quality of life for residents. And the type of people that they would hope to be involved would be Bylaw, Fire, District of Tofino Events, RCMP, Tofino General Hospital. It's quite a long list of various community memberships, similar to what was happening in these early COVID days, and how we can react more quickly to things that arise. And it was voiced that there's maybe concern of stepping on toes. Is Tourism Tofino the right person to bring that to? So I thought I'd just mention that to both the staff and council, if there are any concerns or questions, to be happy to have that conversation further. And I think it's in its infant ideas as a proposal. And that was a big conversation today. And then just looking at sort of the next spring for advertising for Tourism Tofino is really focusing on a sort of a different type of visitor and more looking at meeting planners and stories about businesses and how the community's adapted to COVID, et cetera. So it's less about bringing in new visitors and really looking at that quality and focusing on the community. So I thought it was a really great meeting. Did anybody want to ask any questions before I moved on to my other? Councillor Steer?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Just a quick question on the workshops that are upcoming for the community. Are those workshops with the board and a facilitator and staff, or what is the structure of the workshops?
I believe it's with staff, a facilitator, and then the community.
And are there board members that are part of that workshop as well? Do you know, or?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I can get back to you on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Your next report, Councillor Chalmers.
Sure. And I'll note that this meeting was on Thursday, and things changed quite quickly, as we all know, with COVID. But as of Thursday, the initial talks were that there was a new high of 47 cases in the island, and this was a third more. There was a third more in the last 2.5 weeks since COVID started. So quite concerning in that sense. This has resulted in an overwhelming increase in the high caseload has overwhelmed contact tracing, which has resulted in not as much contact tracing as they would like. They're not fully able to track every single person. So they're really looking to get that transmission rate back down to 1.1, and it's currently at 2.4 to 1. They talked a lot about the limit to Pfizer and how that will look. They're continuing to roll out everything as it goes. And some good news on this is there's been less than 5 cases of allergies, and all of that has been done safely and nothing to be concerned about. And it was all expected results. Just a moment. There was a lot of positive news in regards to the vaccines in that the first phase, long-term care and assisted living were planned to have completed everybody that wants to get vaccinated by Tuesday, so by today. The second wave is rural and remote First Nations, and that's well underway. And then the third priority group, which is highest risk healthcare workers, immunization, so that would be healthcare workers that are working in emergencies or COVID related areas. This is where the supply issues start to come into play. They've immunized about 1,000 of 3,000. They have about another 1,200 that they were planning to do kind of over the week. And then that's where they start to hit the lows. Overall, they've immunized about 20,000 people on the island, 2.5% of adults. And at the time, there was 201 active cases on the island. I did ask them what, looking at the February 5th orders, what these like hard numbers are saying. And it was a very vague answer, but there is potential to go back to the early days where there'd be more regional closures as opposed to the blanket, but that can change. And it, as I said, it was a very political, vague answer. One thing that was interesting is there was a change in sort of the getting tested. They're encouraging as many people as possible to get tested. They have the capacity. It's happening in a lot more real time. And even for just that reassurance, they're really encouraging anybody that even has any hesitations to go and get tested. They've seen no flu in community, but still a spike in the demand on healthcare. And this is coming specifically from chronic issues, frailty at home. So people that may not go to the hospital or be checked on by their family because of COVID distancing, and then mental health and substance abuse. So the hospital capacity has still been at 100%, is still the same as it has been in typical years, even though there's less of the flus and colds going around. And that's pretty much everything I have. If there's any questions on that.
I have none. Thank you for keeping us up to date on that file, and I think it's good that we have one person following that. Thanks, Councillor Chalmers. Councillor Steer, you also had a verbal report for council from the ACRD board table.
Yes. Thank you, Acting Mayor Anderson. Yes. So I guess the first thing was that at the last board meeting, I was appointed as a director from Tofino to the board of the ACRD. And so the ACRD is currently in its budget process, and which has to be completed by March 31st, interestingly enough. And a couple of interesting staff appointments that I thought were relevant in terms of the discussions we were having. And a grant and asset management coordinator was approved. Very interesting. And there was also an improvement of a full-time protective service coordinator, which is also including the duties of their ESS, which was a part-time position before. And of relevance to us that there is now also a full-time permanent landfill supervisor. One of the other areas of the budget with the ACRD that had been talked about and that has relevance to the West Coast here was the COVID restart funds. The ACRD was allotted about $485,000, and one of the areas that that I had noted in there it was that there was approximately $27,600 that was unallocated, and one of the issues that has arisen on the West Coast that I'm sure all of council is fully aware of was some of the unauthorized camping issues, especially in the Kennedy Flats area. And so one of the discussions that I brought forward was that funds, I was hoping, right now there is no service provided by the ACRD in terms of protective service bylaw for that area. And so some of that money we are looking at maybe reallocating towards that. It was not in the strategic plan, but it is an issue that has come forward and was directly related to some of the COVID issues that had arisen this summer. So we thought that it might be appropriate there. So the other area was that I think was an allocation of approximately $90,000 to the Long Beach Airport, and this was for the increased operating costs during the pandemic and subsequent loss of revenues that the airport had faced out there. So this was an important contribution to the airport. The other area that I thought was very significant to the West Coast was that the ACRD had directed staff to provide tax mitigation options involving reduced hospital district requisitions. And I think this is an important to be aware of on the coast, is that it has implications of a reduced hospital district requisition. This is money that goes into basically a reserve fund for future capital projects. And these requisitions would support the potential funding of a new hospital facility on the West Coast. And so the contributions for such projects are 60% to the province and 40% from the regional district. And so these contributions these requisitions are an important source of revenue for the reserves. And there was I guess a discussion around some of the mitigation efforts around the potential tax burden to the ACRD in general. So I brought that up, that I was very concerned about those reductions, potential reductions, and it has gone back to staff to look at the implications as to what that reduction in requisition would be. So I'll be keeping an eye on that and update council further as that goes by. We also had concurrently the West Coast Committee, which consists of the leachate problem and to expand the life capacity of the landfill. The approximate cost of that project is around $2.2 million. And that project will be moving forward. It is something that is long overdue. I believe that is it. We have the ACRD board meeting tomorrow, and some of these topics will be brought forward in that meeting, and I will give an update next council meeting regarding that.
Thank you, Councillor Steer, and thank you for covering off that the ACRD board part of the workload that Council 4 is handling right now. So that brings us almost to the end of our agenda. We have no unfinished business and we have no closed session today. So all that remains is item 12, question period. And if Elise is still there, or any staff member, I'm wondering if they can tell me if anyone signed up for question period.
Through the mayor, I don't see anyone signed up for the question period right now. No, there's no one signed up for question period.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks, council members. We got through a fairly heavy agenda in good time. So now we can look to adjournment. Who would like to move that? Moved and seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.